I'm joined by John Carleton, who runs classes here at the centre. Thanks for joining us.
No problem.
Could you tell us some of the differences between the three forms of fencing?
Yes, certainly. There's three weapons in fencing. One's the main weapon, or one of the main weapons is épée, and that's based on the old Three Musketeers sword or rapier, and that the whole body's on target, and there's hardly any rules. And basically, if you get a point, if you hit somebody, you get a point. If you both hit together, you both get points. The next weapon is the foil, which is a training weapon. It was set up to teach fencing before they moved on to the épée. And the foil is much lighter, and it teaches both attack and defence. So when one person attacks, the other person has to defend first before they can hit you. And the target for that is a lot smaller. It's the trunk of the body. And the last weapon, and the odd one out of the lot, is the sabre, which uses the point of the weapon to score points, but also the edge of the weapon. So it's a slashing weapon, and that's derived from the cavalry sword, which is used when they're on horseback. And the idea of it being slashing is that when you're in a cavalry charge, heading towards your enemy, if you actually stabbed them with the sword, as you went past, you'd leave the sword in your opponent, or your enemy, and in front of you is all the other enemy, and you haven't got a weapon at all. Absolutely. Now the target area in that weapon is also from the trunk of the body up, and the reason for that, when you look back in history, is quite obvious. When you're on your horse and you're fighting your opponent, the last thing you want to do is hurt your opponent's horse, because again, sometime your horse might become lame and you want your enemy's horses to replenish your horses, and you're not bothered at all about killing your actual enemy. So that's the three weapons.
And so, behind you've got the scoring system. In competitive fencing today, how is the scoring?
How's the scoring done?
Yep.
Right, in the early rounds of fencing, you fence in pools of 5, 6, normally 6 people, and in that there you fence up to 5 points in a 3-minute period. And it's the first 1 to 5 point actually wins the bout. In those pool rounds, that sorts out your seeding, and then you go into something called direct elimination. And in that, you fence to 15 points in 3 3-minute periods. So the fight can last about 9 minutes. That time, though, is actual fencing time. So if a referee calls halt, the clock stops. And then when he calls fence again, the clock starts. So that 9-minute period could extend anything up to about 15 minutes. So it's a long time to be on the fencing piece. And at the end of that, the person who gets 15 points goes through, and unfortunately the person who doesn't get 15 points is out.
And have you noticed, since the Olympics perhaps in London, a rise in popularity?
Huge rise, particularly straight after the Olympics. We actually held 2 more beginners classes that we don't, normally we do about 2 or 3 a year. On top of that, we have to do another 2 because of the rise in interest. What we do an 8-week beginners course to introduce people to fencing, to get them comfortable with what fencing is before they join the main club, just so they don't feel so scared when they're stood in front of someone who's been fencing, say, for about a year, 2 years.
Because it does look, for someone who's not done it before, it can look quite intimidating.
Yeah.
Is it quite accommodating to beginners?
Oh yeah. Especially as we run the beginners course, it means that you've got people of the same level, the same understanding, as timid as each other, so that you grow together until eventually you can fence people like myself and other people that have been fencing many years who can pass on their experience to you, and you'll gradually learn and become comfortable with the sport.
Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, visit us on Facebook, Twitter, and go to www.flipsidesport.com for more great content.